What if I told you that most of the decisions you make every single day are not truly yours? They are quietly shaped by hidden biases, unquestioned assumptions, and persuasive voices around you, from advertising that manipulates your emotions to social pressures that bend your beliefs. Your mind is constantly influenced without your awareness. The shocking truth is this: unless you learn to think critically, you are not the driver of your life, you are merely a passenger. The Critical Thinker by Steven Schuster argues that critical thinking is not a skill reserved for philosophers, scientists, or intellectual elites. It is a discipline of mind that every person must cultivate in order to see clearly, make better choices, and live with independence. The big idea is simple but powerful if you master the principles of critical thinking. You will not only avoid deception and poor judgment, but you will also gain the ability to shape your own future with clarity, fairness, and confidence. Before proceeding to the book summary, if you are new to my channel and not subscribed yet, then please subscribe to my channel and don't forget to hit the bell icon so you get notification for next amazing book summary on time. Let's begin the summary. Chapter 1. What is critical thinking? What if the single most important skill for your career, your relationships, and your personal freedom is also the most misunderstood? We throw around the term critical thinking, but what does it truly mean beyond just being smart? And why is the common image of a critical thinker as a cynical, negative critic completely wrong and even dangerous? This chapter does not just define critical thinking. It dismantles the myths and builds a powerful new definition from the ground up. Critical thinking is not about intelligence. It is about intellectual discipline. It is the art of self-directed, self-monitored, and self-corrective thinking. It means actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and evaluating information to reach an answer or a conclusion. Let us break down this definition. Self-directed, you are in the driver's seat of your own thoughts, not on autopilot, accepting whatever you hear or feel. Skillfully conceptualizing, you can grasp the core ideas and frameworks behind any problem. Analyzing and evaluating, you do not just consume information, you dissect it. You ask, what is the source? What is the evidence? What are the underlying assumptions? Are there logical fallacies? The chapter emphasizes that at its heart, critical thinking is a tool for clarity and empowerment, not criticism. It is the difference between seeing the world in blurry shades of gray and seeing it in high definition with all its complexities and nuances. It is what allows you to form your own worldview rather than inheriting someone else's. Now that we have a crystal clear picture of what critical thinking truly is, the immediate question is, how do we do it? Are there specific rules, a checklist, a set of guiding principles we can follow to ensure our thinking is sharp and sound? The next chapter provides the essential rule book for your mind. Chapter 2. What are the main guidelines of critical thinking? You would not build a house without a blueprint, so why would you build your decisions and beliefs without one? What are the non-negotiable guidelines that act as the foundation for all rational thought? And what is the one simple question that, if you asked it more often, would instantly improve 90% of your decisions? This chapter moves from theory to practice, outlining the fundamental guidelines that form the critical thinker's code of conduct. These are not just tips. They are systematic disciplines. The first and most crucial guideline is to ruthlessly question assumptions. We operate on thousands of unexamined assumptions every day about people, about how the world works, about ourselves. The critical thinker brings these into the light. They constantly ask, what am I assuming to be true here, and is it actually true? The second guideline is the sovereign rule of evidence. It is not enough to have an opinion. You must have a well-reasoned judgment based on credible evidence. This means actively seeking out information, but more importantly, evaluating its quality. Is the source biased? Is the data relevant? Is there enough of it? Is there evidence that contradicts my initial belief? The third guideline is perspective taking. Before solidifying a conclusion, a critical thinker actively seeks out and genuinely considers other viewpoints. This is not to necessarily agree with them, but to stress test their own reasoning against alternative interpretations. It is a deliberate check against your own innate confirmation bias. Finally, the chapter discusses the guideline of intellectual humility, the willingness to admit that you might be wrong, and the awareness of the limits of your own knowledge. This is the engine of growth and learning. These guidelines give us a powerful modern framework, but to truly master them, we must understand their roots. How does the human mind even develop the capacity for this kind of thinking? The answer lies in the groundbreaking work of a pioneer who mapped the very stages of human thought. Chapter 3. Piaget's theory on thinking. Did you know that your ability to think critically was not something you were born with, but something you had to develop stage by stage, like learning to walk? And what if many adults, despite their age, have actually stalled in their cognitive development, never reaching the final, most powerful stage of thinking? This chapter delves into Jean Piaget's revolutionary theory of cognitive development, which is not just about children, but a roadmap for intellectual maturity. Piaget identified 4 key stages that humans progress through. First, the sensory-motor stage 0 to 2 years, where learning is purely through senses and actions. Then, the pre-operational stage 2 to 7 years, where language and imagination develop, but thinking is egocentric and illogical. Next, the concrete operational stage 7 to 11 years, where logical thinking about concrete events emerges, but abstract thought is still difficult. The final stage, which is the ultimate goal for a critical thinker, is the formal operational stage 12, adulthood. This is where we develop the ability to think abstractly, to reason hypothetically, and to use deductive logic. We can now consider what-if scenarios, systematically test hypotheses, and understand complex philosophical and scientific concepts. The critical insight here is that reaching this stage is not guaranteed. Many people operate primarily in the concrete operational stage, dealing well with the tangible and present but struggling with abstract systems, future consequences, and ideological arguments. Critical thinking, then, is the conscious and disciplined practice of operating firmly within the formal operational stage. It is the act of finishing the job of your own cognitive development. Piaget gave us the map for how our thinking matures. But how do we take that potential and turn it into a practical, day-to-day system? This brings us to a modern framework that has become the gold standard for applying critical thinking in education and professional life today. Chapter 4. The Science of Paul Elder. What if you had a complete, battle-tested system for thinking? A checklist that could be applied to any problem, any argument, or any decision to ensure you never miss a critical flaw. And what if this system was built on just 2 powerful components that transform your mind from a passive receiver of information into an active analytical power tool? This chapter introduces the Paul Elder framework, which is widely considered the most comprehensive model for critical thinking. It argues that strong critical thinking rests on 2 foundational pillars: the elements of thought and the intellectual standards. First, let's talk about the elements of thought. These are the 8 basic building blocks of any reasoning process. Whenever you are thinking, you are doing so for a purpose. You are trying to answer a question. You use information or data. You make inferences to reach conclusions. You operate based on concepts or ideas. You make assumptions. Your reasoning leads to implications, and you see everything from a point of view. The critical thinker learns to identify and scrutinize each of these 8 elements in their own thinking and in the arguments of others. The second pillar is the universal intellectual standards. These are the criteria you use to check the quality of your thinking. You must ask, is my purpose clear? Is the information accurate and relevant? Are my inferences logical? Are the concepts I'm using precise? Have I considered the full breadth and depth of the issue? Are my assumptions fair? By applying these standards to the elements of thought, you have a systematic way to improve the quality of everything you think. This framework gives us an incredible mechanical structure for our thoughts, but a machine is useless without the right fuel. What is the single most important intellectual habit that fuels this entire system? The one practice that separates superficial understanding from truly mastering any subject. Chapter 5: Understand Deeply. We live in a world that rewards speed and the illusion of knowledge, but what is the catastrophic cost of confusing familiarity with true understanding? How can you tell if you genuinely understand something versus just recognizing the words? And what is the one technique that can instantly reveal the gaps in your knowledge on any topic? This chapter is a deep dive into the principle of understand deeply, which is the antithesis of superficial learning. The chapter argues that most of us operate with a fragile knowledge base. We can pass a test or have a casual conversation, but we collapse under questioning or cannot apply the knowledge in a new context. The path to deep understanding begins with the Feynman Technique. Named after the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman, this technique is brutally simple. Take a sheet of paper and write the concept you want to understand at the top. Then write an explanation of it as if you were teaching it to a complete novice, a child. This forces you to use simple language and avoid jargon. The moment you struggle, where you find yourself resorting to complex terms or cannot make a clear connection, you have identified a gap in your understanding. That gap is your new learning target. Beyond this technique, deep understanding requires seeing the connections. It is not just knowing a fact, but knowing why it is true, how it relates to other facts, what its history is, and what its limitations are. It is about building a rich, interconnected web of knowledge in your mind, rather than a list of disjointed bullet points. This depth is what allows for true creativity and problem solving, because you can see patterns and relationships that others miss. Knowing that we need to understand deeply is one thing, but how do we actually build the mental muscles to do it consistently? What are the daily exercises and practical habits that transform these lofty ideals of critical thinking into tangible automatic skills? Chapter 6: How to Develop Critical Thinking Skills. Is critical thinking a skill you can train, like a muscle? If so, what does the mental gym look like? What are the specific daily workouts that will strengthen your reasoning, sharpen your analysis, and expand your perspective starting from today? This chapter moves from theory into direct action, providing a practical training regimen for your mind. It is not enough to know the principles. You must practice them deliberately. The first and most powerful exercise is the habit of proactive questioning. Do not consume information passively. As you read a news article, watch a commercial, or sit in a meeting, actively ask, what is the main claim being made? What evidence is provided to support it? What is the source of that evidence, and what might be their bias? What is not being said? What would someone who disagrees with this say? This turns every day into a critical thinking workout. The second exercise is thought journaling. Regularly write down a complex problem you are facing or a strong opinion you hold. Then, systematically analyze it using the Paul Elder framework. What are your assumptions? What are the implications if you are right or wrong? From what point of view are you looking at this? This practice builds metacognition, the ability to think about your own thinking. The third key skill is engaging in Socratic debate with yourself and others. This involves arguing from multiple perspectives, not to win, but to explore and understand. Force yourself to make the strongest possible case for a viewpoint you disagree with. This breaks down cognitive biases and builds intellectual empathy, making your own final conclusion far more robust and well defended. You are now building the skills and doing the exercises, but why is it still so difficult? Why do we constantly find our own thinking being hijacked, our logic short-circuited? The answer lies in the invisible barriers hardwired into our psychology that we must learn to identify and dismantle. Chapter 7. Barriers to Critical Thinking. What if your own brain is secretly working against you? What are the hidden mental shortcuts and emotional traps that consistently corrupt your judgment, making you believe you're being rational when you're actually being manipulated by your own biology? Why can knowing something is illogical not be enough to stop you from believing it? This chapter confronts the invisible architecture of our biases, the psychological barriers that form the greatest obstacle to clear thinking. The first and most powerful barrier is ego and emotional attachment. We fall in love with our own beliefs because they become part of our identity. To question a deeply held opinion feels like a personal attack, so we defend it irrationally. We'd rather be right than be accurate, and we selectively seek out information that confirms what we already believe, a phenomenon known as confirmation bias. The second major category is social and environmental barriers. This includes groupthink, the pressure to conform to a team or culture even when you know it's wrong. It also includes the influence of authority figures and tradition, believing something simply because a leader said it or because it's always been done that way. Our brains are also terrible at assessing risk and probability, a barrier known as heuristics. We fear dramatic, rare events like plane crashes more than the far more likely threat of heart disease, because the former is more vivid and available in our minds. Finally, there is the barrier of mental laziness. System 1 thinking fast, intuitive, and automatic is the brain's default because it consumes less energy. Critical thinking requires System 2 slow, deliberate, and effortful thought. Our minds naturally resist the cognitive strain of analysis, preferring a simple, wrong answer to a complex, right one. Recognizing when you are relying on System 1 in a situation that demands System 2 is half the battle. Overcoming these barriers feels like an internal war for truth. But this pursuit of truth raises a profound question: can we ever be truly objective? And if not, what is our moral responsibility as thinkers in a world where our decisions impact others? Chapter 8. On Ethics and Impartiality. Is truly impartial thinking even possible? Are we not always viewing the world through the lens of our own values, experiences, and desires? And if perfect neutrality is a myth, does that make critical thinking a hopeless endeavor, or does it place an even higher ethical burden on us as thinkers? This chapter tackles the crucial intersection of critical thinking and ethics, arguing that the goal is not a cold, robotic impartiality, but a fair-mindedness. The ethical critical thinker is not without a point of view. Instead, they consistently strive to fairly consider all relevant viewpoints, especially those they disagree with. They actively work to identify their own biases and vested interests in a situation and disclose them. The chapter introduces the concept of intellectual integrity. This means holding yourself to the same rigorous standards of evidence and logic that you apply to others. It means honestly acknowledging the limitations of your knowledge and freely admitting when you are wrong. This is the opposite of what we often see in debates, where the goal is to win rather than to discover the truth. Furthermore, the ethical thinker considers the consequences of their reasoning. A decision can be logically sound but ethically monstrous. Critical thinking must therefore be coupled with a strong ethical framework. It asks not just, is this decision logical, but is this decision just? Who will it help and who will it harm? Are the implications aligned with my values and a greater good? This makes critical thinking not just a cognitive tool, but a tool for responsible citizenship and leadership. We have journeyed from the definition of critical thinking through its frameworks and skills, past its barriers, and into its ethical implications. Now we arrive at the final, most important question: how do you bring all of this together to make this powerful mindset a permanent part of who you are? Chapter 9, Conclusion. What is the ultimate takeaway from mastering all these principles and techniques? Is it simply to make better decisions? Or is it something much deeper, a fundamental shift in your relationship with the world, with information, and ultimately with yourself? The conclusion of the critical thinker synthesizes everything into a single, powerful message. Critical thinking is not a collection of skills to be occasionally used. It is a lifelong practice and a fundamental identity. It is the commitment to being a person who would rather face an uncomfortable truth than cling to a comfortable illusion. The book concludes that this journey transforms you from a passive passenger in your own life into the active pilot. You stop being a consumer of ideas and become an evaluator and creator of them. You develop intellectual courage, the willingness to challenge popular opinion. You cultivate intellectual empathy, the ability to understand opposing viewpoints, and you build intellectual perseverance, the determination to work through complexity and frustration. This is not a destination, but a continuous path of growth. The world will not stop throwing misinformation, biased arguments, and complex problems at you. A critical thinker does not seek to avoid this reality, but embraces it as the very playing field on which they are equipped to excel. The goal is to build a resilient, agile mind that can navigate uncertainty with confidence and principle. This concludes the blueprint, but a blueprint is useless unless you pick up the tools and start building. The final step is to turn this knowledge into daily action. Closing. The final thought and CTA: the critical thinker gives you the ultimate tool for the 21st century, an upgraded mind in an age of information overload. Your greatest asset is not what you know, but how you think. Now I want to hear from you. What is the one cognitive barrier, like confirmation bias or emotional reasoning, that you find most challenging to overcome? Share your biggest insight in the comments below. If this summary helped you, support the channel, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Why? Because we are just getting started. In our next video, we are breaking down another powerful book that will help you master the art of persuasion and influence. You will not want to miss it. Thank you for watching. Now go out there and think critically.